If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Courtney, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 262 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Great to have you back for what sure just spark up the airwaves with my guest this week, Hal Sparks. That's right, Hal Sparks returns to the show, and we've got a lot to talk about. We're diving into his time at Second City as a 15-year-old, queer as folk stories, dude, where's my car stories, voice impressions. This episode's got it all, and that's coming up in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, Alex Hyde-White was here last week. Quick reminder, episode 260, the OG Reed Richards from Roger Corman's Fantastic Four. Tons of great stories. Alex is an amazing storyteller. You'll love that episode. Speaking of superheroes, we talk a lot about superheroes in this episode. You're going to love it. Get ready for it all right now with Hal Sparks. Enjoy. All right, everyone, I'm excited to introduce you to my next guest, stand-up comedian, actor, podcaster, radio host, political commentator, and musician. Loved him in Queer as Folk, Talk, Soup, Lab, Rats. Welcome to the show, Hal Sparks. What?
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's nice to be here again. Technical difficulties aside that no one else was privy to, I want people to know that we are indeed, between the two of us, mega worldwide currently. So we're reaching everyone via their ear holes.
Oh, what does that mean?
Yeah. It just means that the great thing about the internet is singularly different than any other broadcast medium up until about 20 years ago. And that's still insane.
It's crazy.
Do you realize the amount of production and money and backing, just support from governments and technological entities that you would have had to do just to have your podcast available to the people that it's available to now at this time on the planet? It's absurd. Don't even get me started on the Jesuits stopping everybody from reading. So congratulations on being everywhere all at once, I think.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, you could almost $0 be broadcasting.
Right. It's, and again, that's both amazing and wonderful and terrifying considering some of the folks that are out there and the quality of thought going on between their ears. So
absolutely. So one thing I wanted to cover.
Okay.
Big news since. So you were here late 2020.
Yes. A lot has happened since then.
A lot has happened since then. And funny, I was re-listening to it to see what we were talking to, and you accurately predicted a crazy January. So kudos to you.
Thanks.
But also in the world, what happened was Spider-Man No Way Home was released.
Right.
Bringing in the multiverse, thus making you an official part of the MCU based on your cameo in Spider-Man 2 as Guy in Elevator.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm looking for in the future me being an alternate universe Peter Parker, since I will say I favor him. If you look at the old, besides the long hair currently, I do favor him looks wise post college photographer age. But still, I think that whole nice Spidey suit could be an ironic phrase that my character was making ultimately now that we have the multiverse happening. Also, I've decided, too, after the way they've gone with the MCU, is that I am the child of Agent Carter and Captain America. I think that's another character I could ultimately play. I guess super soldier serum genetics don't kick in until much later after my appearance at that point in the MCU. So, yeah, we'll work it out. It's going to happen.
It's got to happen. I don't see how it couldn't. It's in the stars.
Yes, it is.
But that's not the only superhero genre. You were a skateboarder in Lois and Clark.
That's true. I was, and I may have been the murderer in disguise, or just some hapless twerp with a really good sense of humor. And it's up to the viewer to decide what was the truth, because I ultimately did push Lois Lane into traffic. One of the few attempts on her life that was almost successful. Had Superman literally not been standing next to her, she would be gone from the entire DCU. I would have felt terrible about it, but it would have been pivotal. I was more successful in my attempt in many ways, even than Lex Luthor himself. He gave Superman enough time to, fly all the way over and reverse time.
Right.
If he hadn't been literally crossing the street with her, it would have been game over. Just saying.
Just saying. Right. No,
it would have been Lana Lang stories from that point on.
I think we need to get Dean Cain a little reunion on your Mega World.
Yeah, that's true. He can't, I don't think he could lift me the way he could back then. They had a little teeter-totter thing to have him lift me up. But because at that time I was editing the demo pilot for my sketch comedy group, I had lost so much weight doing that I weighed like 127 pounds, fully clothed, soaking wet. And as a former football player, that's a curl. You know what I mean? Like he could probably curl 200 pounds, maybe 180 at that point. So he was able to lift me up like a kid. Not for long, but long enough for the bit. Like he could lift me and hold me like this. But it was good enough for the gag. And they kept one of my jokes, which was, lay off the amino acids. I thought that was, of the 9 or 10 improvs I threw in there, that was the one that they liked the most. Roids was too edgy, but amino acids was right on the money.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I think that's all your superhero genre, at least that I...
No, I mean, Lab Rats entirely. I did create, and Disney owns Marvel, so
there you go.
I'm just saying, at some point, a Lab Rats comic book, followed by a reunion, followed by a next generation, it's got to happen at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, my kids were really into Lab Rats. They loved it. It's funny when I talk to certain people, when they can have a completely different connection to them. Like I talked to Ed Asner, and to them, he's not Lou Grant. He was Santa from Elf or Up, right?
Yeah, right. Or right. The voice of Up. Yeah, absolutely. So and to me, he's the guy who, in the original iteration of Second City, cleaned the toilets to pay for his classes. Not a lot of people know that. And so when I was a teenager and I was in the Second City teen troupe, one of the stories we always heard is that anytime you use the bathroom, you were like, at one point, Ed Asner cleaned this place so that he could pay for his classes. And you behaved yourself.
Out of respect for Lou.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
That's fine. So Lab Rats, I was reading, first biracial couple. So that was a big first.
Yeah, in the lead role in an American sitcom. I don't know, and sci-fi as well, I suppose. But myself and Angel Parker, who, by the way, could not be more talented and lovely. I shouldn't say that because she probably gets more talented and lovely every day. So, but in my experience of her was just a joy to work with on all fronts. So that was just a gem of an experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So at 17, you're in Second City.
15.
15, you're at 15. Okay, so at 15, you're at Second City. How did you get involved at Second City in Chicago, right? At that age?
Yeah.
And who else was around? I mean, Ed Asner had cleaned the toilets, but he was gone by now.
Right. Well, at that point, main stage was Richard Kind and Bonnie Hunt was there. They rotated through. Essentially, what happened was when I moved to Chicago when I was 14, like in the year right after turning 15. And as soon as I got to Chicago's got such a blue collar attitude towards the arts. Like there's no magic in it. Like New York, it's this weird, and it's the same as LA. It's just darker. It's like the DCU versus the MCU, on the coast. Like you have to be discovered. You have to have some sort of magical explosion that gives you your powers. Whereas Chicago's more like old kung fu movies. Like you just practice and get beat with a reed and stand in a bunch of positions over and over until you have magic kung fu powers. There was a very distinct road. And one of the places I knew about was Second City because I was a huge fan of SCTV. They used to play it on Kentucky Educational Television after Monty Python. And so I was aware of the name. And then, holy crap, there it was. And then they had a teen troupe. And my buddy Andy and I decided we were going to audition for the teen troupe. We took trains down Chicago. We got off the Sedgwick L stop and we got on the bus and we went the wrong way. And so we went into a real shitty, dangerous part of Chicago until we realized, I think you should be able to see the water at some point because it's not too far from the beach. And so we switched buses, went right back. We were a little bit late, but killed it, essentially. And Andy and I started there, and Andy stopped doing it for whatever reason. I think his parents wanted him to be an accountant. They were very focused. They're a very North Shore family, whereas in my family, it's like, I don't know what the hell you're going to do with your life. I mean, you're not going to be pumping gas because we don't live down there anymore. But the rest of it, once you hit 18, it's your ass. So, that really is the attitude. Like at 18, the entire expectation was get out in my family. And so finding your way was always kind of encouraged, even if my dad was very disappointed that I got into Second City and was so well accepted. And, and then, built some friendships up there, got my sort of first agent in ties to that as well. It was just one of the rungs on the ladder at that point. That was great.
Were there any other folks in your troupe that went on? Yeah.
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, like my buddy Dan Zukoski, who had the professional name Jan Charles, was the pizza boy in Home Alone. He gets a nice check every Christmas time, every Thanksgiving when Home Alone airs again, because he's the guy who keep the change, you filthy animal. That whole cheapskate, that scene, right. That's Dan. Okay. And oddly enough, like I would end up doing Stephanie Miller's radio show. I auditioned to be her musical sidekick on her television show that they did a pilot for her. And the place they were auditioning people fried all my music gear and set me back like 5 years in my career. That was singularly the 3 auditions that were like the worst experience in the world. That was the one that cost me like $3,500. Anyways, I would later on be on her radio show doing Hump Days with Hal. And then there's a comedy duo, Frangela. And Frances from Frangela, it's Angela B. Shelton and Frances. And Frances was at Second City with me, too. And she randomly ended up guest hosting on Steph's show. Literally professionally know Frances more than anyone else in my life. She's been around longer. So it's amazing.
Actually, you know what? We were talking superheroes. So
yes,
Hal Saban. That's Power Rangers, right? So you weren't Power Ranger, but
no, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
Right, but
yeah,
he did hire you while in high school.
Yes, yeah, I was the youngest. I'm still, I think, the youngest game show host in history. I was not quite 18 yet when I hosted Treasure Mall. And Hal Saban he had just gotten the rights to translate the Power Ranger shows, and he hadn't done it in English yet. So he was doing it in Israel and a couple of other countries. It was this Japanese show. And then they got the idea basically to like cast different actors and shoot the other stuff with actors from wherever. And it was a brilliant plan because once they turn into the Power Rangers and in the suit, who cares? So you just hire a bunch of kids and that's the Power Rangers in Israel and the Middle East and in Russia and wherever. It didn't matter. He was just kind of creating that. He had a little 3-room mini like strip mall office on Ventura Boulevard, and it had a music studio in it and an audio recording studio. Not really didn't have a drum room or anything. And I recorded my second 2 music demos in that studio. The first ones I paid for with my own money from Treasure Mall in Chicago. And then the other ones I recorded there with my buddy Johnny Million, who's on my radio show now. And we were in a band in high school. And he was using those basically to audition voice actors to play the Power Rangers, that studio. And then they would do it later in front of they had a screen studio where they could do the ADR afterwards. And then I got Treasure Mall and we rehearsed it in an empty storefront next door, like a clothing store that had gone out of business. And he just rented the space and they brought in kids and I would just run the game show with these 7 and 10-year-olds over and over and over again. The weirdest part was the director, Rob Fiedler, I became really good friends with. He had a partner named Peter Berlin, and they did a bunch of game shows. That was their big thing for years. Fiedler Berlin Productions did a ton of game shows that you've seen. And Peter, I forget what the word was now because it's been burned out of me. I was saying something like awesome. I would say awesome too much or something. And so he got a bell, and he would ring the bell anytime I said awesome, just so I would know that I was saying it. It was like ding, a ding, a ding. And I'm like, all right. And it was actually a great way to train you away. Like, I literally can't even think of what the word was right now. There's like a ding interrupt in my head.
Sometimes I think I need one of those. I think I do that as a train. Oh, that was awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Or right. Or it's like I almost wish they had one of those on Newsmax when people say, I totally agree. Or, what my other pet peeve phrase is right now, at the end of the day. Oh, my God, someone at MSNBC and CNN. I don't watch enough Fox to know if it's a problem there, but needs to have someone like ringing a bell every time someone says at the end of the day, 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 at the end of the day. It's tortures.
I worked with someone that was his go-to phrase. And I had an article that said that was the most overused, annoying phrase in the English language or something like that. And I would keep it and take it out every time he would use it. But it was everything was, well, look, at the end of the day. Yeah,
look, at the end of the day, it's night. I don't know what to tell you. Like, or there's another day. There are no end of days. Like, what kind of like Schwarzenegger biblical action movie bullshit is this? At the end of the sixth day, at the end of the days, this type of things. So, yeah, it's so aggravating.
What other voices can you do?
I never know until I do them. Like it's one of those things like the ones that people ask for that are kind of rare are it's no use, Luke. If you'd have been there, you'd have been killed too. And the droids would be in the hands of the Empire. You don't need to see his identification. Move along. Like Sir Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan. Yeah, that's a random one.
That's great, though.
And like Mako, you remember the actor Mako? Sometimes you make me tremble with disgust. He's in Conan. He's in Jackie Chan's The Big Brawl. He's just an amazing Japanese actor. He passed away not too long ago. He's incredible. And of course, the one I'm kind of known for being able to do that nobody else can really do is Bobcat. Thank you very much. I'm a vegetarian.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty. And the weird thing was, Zoltan, Dude, Where's My Car? I auditioned for the Ashton Kutcher part, and I know I'm not getting it because it's just the studio wanting to see other people. It was written by one of the writers from that 70s show. It was written with Ashton in mind, but the studio always likes to have a backup in case they have to recast it, like, Back to the Future or something. So they bring people in. And so I came in to audition for this, and I was like, there is no way I'm getting this for that part. But apparently I was so funny reading it that they decided to rework the Zoltan character and go, maybe we can flesh this character out. Because initially he was written like a guy petting a white cat. You never saw his face until at the end he was like this pot-faced teenager or something. And then they're like, we can't cast a kid in this because there's too many pot references. So he's going to have to be older. What do we do? And they expanded the Zoltan character and said, come in and read for that. And I did, and they're like, perfect. But for the test, they wanted another alternate. They always do. The same way I was the alternate for Ashton. I'm sitting there in the office. There's nobody else there to do the callback except for Bobcat Goldthwait. The only person that they were considering other than me for Zoltan was Bobcat. I love him, and I have such respect for him. And obviously, or I wouldn't be able to do the voice that well. And I memorized his records, and I memorized his lines from Police Academy and Shakes the Clown. And I just adore the dude. He must have felt like shit sitting next to me being the choice, the alt choice in this situation. And he would have been miserable doing the part. I guarantee it. Like if they'd put him in a bubble wrap jumpsuit, good Lord, the man would have it would have been horrifying. I'm glad. I feel like I helped him dodge a bullet because I had a great time. He would not have. He would have felt awful about it. And he would have been irritated by the people bringing up, you were in Dude, Where's My Car? You were that Zoltan dude. Like, it would have grated on him. You could just tell. And me, I'm like, yeah, it was amazing. It's super fun. The world, I guess the universe weaves together in such strange friggin' ways. But I avoided doing an impersonation of him to him at that moment. And I've said that I will only do it again anywhere in his proximity on Kimmel.
So he's never heard it in person?
And not in person, no. I'm sure he's heard me do it elsewhere. I know he knows that I do it. Yeah, but I don't do it on stage. I have a pet peeve about people who take comedy characters or comedians' personalities and impersonate them on stage. People who do Jerry Seinfeld or whatever. Gilbert Gottfried is the one person who can get away with it or could get away with it. He would do Dice and he would do Jerry Seinfeld. And it was almost like a fuck you to those guys. But in my case, I remember in the 80s, people used to do Pee Wee Herman on stage. And I'm like, you guys do realize that's not Paul Rubin's real voice. He created that character. That character is funny. The reason you're getting laughs is because this guy created an absurd character. you didn't discover, like, look how weird this guy talks. And that's the way they would do the bit, too. My buddy Matt and I used to sit at Zany's and watch comic after comic going, what if Pee Wee Herman did this? And you're like, oh, God. That's the whole point of the character, dipshit. Like, oh, okay, it's so infuriating. So I don't really do, Bobcat on stage for that very reason, because it's a funny character that Bob Goldthwait crafted and created. Of course it's funny. Of course what you say while you say it is funny. It's supposed to be.
My thought would be, if you were to do it on stage, Hal Sparks,
yes,
is that you do it just as quickly as you did it for me a minute ago.
Yes.
And then it's more like you're a fan service to your fans and more of like a flex. Like, I can do this, but I'm not doing it.
Yes.
You just got a taste of something.
Right. The 2 times I have done it, that's precisely how it's been done. Like a reference to him having just been someplace. Like, I think I did it at the Comedy Store years ago, as like he'd come in and left. The point, like, hey, Bobcat was just here, or somebody said that to me on stage because, like, they knew I was a fan. And so, like, one of the other comics was like watching the show. We were in the belly room, I think. And I was like, how long was he here? And they're like, not long. And I was like, okay, so basically just walked in and went, thank you very much, and just left, like that kind of thing. That was enough where everybody was like, how can you even?
Right. Sorry to interrupt. Have to take a quick break. I do want to thank everyone for their support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back to my incredible conversation with Hal Sparks.
So I at one point made a list of all the impersonations I do, because I used to do a thing called one-line impersonations, because I could only do one line. Like, I can't do Bruce Willis, but I can go, Gless, who gives a shit about Gless? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's one line from Die Hard. And that was enough, and I would just do a line of, that's it. Like, there's Chewbacca. At one point I was doing Star Wars in 1 minute. And I would do all the sound effects, and it got a little, like, back in the like in the 90s when I was doing open mics and shit like that. I would, it was all just like, whoa, 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 like, and I would just run through the, and like, move along, and then, we're doomed. Like, that would, like, just like. It was just like a piece of everything. And that was fun. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, there are some people that I could just naturally, I feel like I can fall into doing. And then there's other people I'm like, I just don't have the throat for it. I do more like singer sound-alikes. That's easier for me. Partly it's like because I'm a fan or whatever. So I will sometimes do like Lane Staley singing Godsmack from Alice in Chains, the whole care not for the man who wanders, now you know that none are blind. That's a good time. It works really well at the Ultimate Jam Night, the thing I do at the Whiskey. So
that is amazing. That is so cool. That is so. Zoltan, real quick. So you created the.
Yeah, the Z symbol, right, which is on break right now thanks to the fucking Russians. But they're now that they've kind of moved past the Z, now they're onto the V. There's a V spray painted on all their shit. That I feel like the Zoltan Z will be coming back as a physical hand sign. But I like tapped it down for a while in the early part of the year just because, the Z symbol was so weighted because of what was going on there. There's a weird geopolitical aspect to what's okay comedically, that happens too.
Yeah, also, I wasn't aware of the political ramifications of the Z.
Yeah.
I was aware that the Pittsburgh Pirates adopted the Z symbol for good luck.
Yeah, right. And anytime they'd hit a base hit or a home run or something like that, people would run around the bases and do the big Z. And then soccer players, like in the World Cup, have done it. Like, it's kind of amazing. Like, and I thought that up, in my apartment in Santa Monica while I was shooting that. And that's one of those things where, like, that'll always be there. There's a few impacts you have as an artist where you're like, oh, you're always throwing pebbles hoping there's a ripple effect. And then sometimes you just don't even realize it hits perfectly. And then the waves keep coming. Like Queer as Folk, there's some depth to that program that will have lasting impact in people's lives kind of going on forever and ever and ever. And that's a beautiful thing. Same thing to some degree with Lab Rats and my relationship on that show, which is great. But the Zoltan Z thing was just one of those where you would never expect. And yet, there it goes. Every time I turn around, it's somewhere else.
It's really funny because that movie in itself it's a cult classic.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
You never know what's going to become a cult classic. I don't think there's a day on Twitter I don't see somebody tweet something that has some kind of tied in reference to that movie.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting that they kind of, with Harold Kumar and some of that stuff, they tried to create similar things and none of them kind of had the zappy impact of the first one. Not that it couldn't, but I have been toying with doing a spoof trailer for a Zoltan sequel where, he's just been in the wilderness and, he's kind of lost his mind. And it's kind of this jokey Thanos Rambo voiceover, like they laughed at us, that monologue but just done in this kind of Cobra voice. And it has to be done. It just kind of has to be at some point.
It sounds like a perfect thing for TikTok.
You're right. Or Netflix as an actual thing. Right. We'll see.
I wanted to ask you a question. I know you were on the I love the I love the 80s. I love that. So talk to me about when they go to you, and I don't mean you specifically, but I'm like, oh my God, the Rubik's Cube. I would sit there for hours and play with the Rubik's Cube.
Right.
How much are everyone preparing these? Hey, here's your make sure you have a spontaneous reaction when I show you this.
Well, I had a rule. Okay, they would show you stuff. They would give you a box of video cassettes or DVDs or send you a bunch of links. Later on, you could go to, they would send you a bunch of links as things grew because they could just grab YouTube links of stuff. In the early part of it, they really would just send you whatever prep materials you want. And I refused all of them. I did not want to see any of it because I felt like it would reek of prepped stuff. It would reek of an artificial reaction. And you can tell, I feel, watching those, who really knew the stuff and was really having a reaction versus people who were given the stuff and sat with a friend of theirs and wrote their stuff or sat with and there were some people and I won't name names. And for the record, none of them were Michael Ian Black, that had friends sitting in studio. I mean that genuinely, that were sitting in studio on the floor, pitching them lines so that they would have a gag. There were some people would walk in there with their buddies, hired as writers, paying them, $100 a day or something to come in for that day and just sit there and make them funnier than they might have been, which is amazing to me. I treated it as a genuine documentary of my experience of and love for or hate for stuff and what. And you'll see that there are some segments I'm not in simply because that missed me. I skipped a version of that. Sometimes they would use stuff that I would talk about, I fucking hated whatever it was. And my sister liked it, or two of my friends liked it, and I couldn't stand it. So occasionally you would see a little story about me just complaining about it, but not from the point of view of I remember that. I remember my friend being into that and it was aggravating. That was it. But yeah, tons of people, you could have all the prep you want. But when I did it, I would do 2 days, usually 2 8-hour sessions, one each day. And they would just sit down with this giant binder and go, foop, let's go. All right, here we go. And then they would sometimes early on, they would have me come in for a third session and patch stuff that they had either added midway through or they didn't have enough stuff on that we had skipped because we didn't have enough time because they only had 16 hours with me. At the time, for a lot of them, I was shooting Queer as Folk and I would fly down from Toronto and I'd have to go back and shoot. So we were threading a needle. The goal overall for me was to have my natural reaction captured on screen. Because what's the point of being a smart-ass know-it-all if you look like you cheated?
Exactly. I felt like a lot of it seemed like really all these people remembered that commercial.
And all had a similar reaction to that. There's a lot of uniformity in people's cultural recognition. And of course, you're going to choose the parts that most people can relate to. Most of the stuff you'll see that they pulled of mine wasn't me going, oh, I had that song stuck in my head for weeks or some bullshit like that. The jingle for that was, but or even the setup pieces, they're like, can you give us something no. They really, some of the producers that worked on that kind of didn't like me after a while because they needed to get certain things checked off, like the descriptives. And there were people who were totally comfortable doing it and was great for them, like Lonnie Love. You'll see her doing that a lot. She was totally cool with doing the descriptive, explaining what it was, almost hosting in some cases. And I was not, because I was not being paid as a host. I was being paid for my reactions, and hosting, I'm really good at that. So if you're going to pay me for that, I'm going to be standing. It's going to be this. It's going to have my name on the title somewhere. And I'm not just going to be in a field of other people doing the exact same shit. That costs you more money. If you want my reaction, that's what you're paying for. And so that's how we ended up, coming to an agreement about what I would do and not do. But there were times when they were like, can you give us a little something, and I just refused to do it.
All right. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
So they would sit with you, just you, and film you for 8 hours a day. And then they'd sit with Lonnie Love for 8 hours. And then they just would mash up.
Other people did like 3 hours. You'd occasionally have somebody who would do 3 hours, take a break, and do a couple more hours. A lot of people did an hour. They would really laser focus some people who would come in, and they'd be in and out in 40 minutes because they knew what they were going to do, and they knew which parts they were going to have. And then, or they'd have like, I don't know what Mo Rocca's schedule was. Obviously, like they did it in New York because he was on Daily Show at the time, I think. And they would do it. The VH1 studios were nearby. And so you would just go over there and, hey, can we do a half hour today or something like that? And he'd end up doing a lot of stuff. But he would write for stuff as well. Like he specifically would spend time with the material. And it's why I think he's very much suited for the comedic side of NPR or those kind of things where you can have like smart, quiet comedy. Right? There's a real style there, and he's great at it. I am not because I couldn't, but because I hate it. and so it was, it's just a different way of working. It's a different, style of working. And I prefer improv in terms of that stuff.
All right.
Other people do not. They do not feel safe improving in that circumstance because it's permanent.
Right. Well, they're not Hal Sparks. You clearly.
True.
So a little bit ago, on my Twitter timeline, Hal Sparks retweets a tweet of mine or something of mine. And I thought, oh, Sharon Gless in my Sharon Gless interview. And then it took me a second to realize, oh, she's your mom from Queer as Folk. Yeah. So thank you for that. But let's
yes.
But also a clever segue back to Queer as Folk. So
right. I agree. Not ham-handed at all, Scott. That's Scott Lowell always does these like big setup. It's a long story. Anyways, inside joke. We'll get into the story and then the joke will make sense. All right. Scott would always coordinate. Like we've done so many of those interviews, and I can't remember if you didn't do any of the group ones that we did. No, back in the day, because like I said, we've been at these for a while. Scott Lowell was like the coordinator. He's like corrals the entire cast, and can manage to just like drag everyone back into the room together when they would otherwise scatter. So, yeah, it's an amazing talent.
It is an amazing talent.
Yeah.
You spent, this was 5 years on this show, right?
Yes. Well, 6 years, 5 seasons.
6 years, 5 seasons.
Because you start well before it airs. It stops airing well after you're done. And then you got to hang out in case anything needs to be fixed right up to the final day. Lived in Canada, almost the entire time.
You've been a part of a lot of culturally relevant things, right? I never saw Queer as Folk. I'm not going to pretend to. Just like you don't pretend. I don't think I had Showtime at the time. It was just like one of those things, This is early 2000s, so it's like, I know that the reboot didn't work out. They tried to do a reboot that didn't work out
without us.
Without you guys, and that didn't work out.
I think I know why.
Why they didn't have you, or why it didn't work out?
No, why it didn't work. It should be abundantly clear at some point that I have some sort of bizarre mojo that I bring to everything that makes it culturally significant and kind of amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's without a doubt, yeah.
I mean, my record is pretty clean across the board. The I Love This, any real situation where I'm giving a run, like, if I guest star on something, I can't drag somebody I can't pull a car out of the ditch with a guest starring role. Yeah, if you let me work my magic for a couple of seasons, you're good.
How is Sharon Gless as a mom, as a TV mom?
First of all, her acting commitment is so rock solid that it's one of the most effortless elements of working together. that said, in the very beginning, she has this thing about physical violence. She can't do it. It puts her off, which is interesting because she, most people knew her before that from a cop show. And gunplay is very different from like manhandling someone or physically fighting. It is a different thing. You know what I mean? Pointing a prop gun at somebody and making a face is very different than fight scenes and stuff like that. When she did, and she's mentioned this, when she did Misery in the West End, she did the play version of Misery. Right. They had to cut and modify the sort of wrestling scene where he falls out of the bed and she's beating him or whatever, because she just couldn't bring herself to do it. It was too uncomfortable for her. And when we started doing the show, there's a scene where because she's an Italian mom, she's supposed to whop me upside the head. It's this one particular scene in the very beginning. It was right when we were probably a week into shooting. It was about our confrontation with Justin's mother. And so we go to this younger kid. He's 17, going on 18, and he starts dating a 30-year-old. And it's very uncomfortable and weird. And my character's kind of put off by it. But, age of consent. And if the mom knows about it, they'll say, what? It's not our fucking business. But we both go to basically go, your son's okay. Anyways, as we're leaving, I say, you're still wearing that same old coat. She goes, you'll buy me a better one when you're rich, a better one when you're rich. And I go, yeah, you'll freeze to death first. And she whops me in the back of the head. She's supposed to hit me in the back of the head like a mom. And she couldn't do it. Every time she did it, it was terrible. It was like, it was this weird little thing. I took her hand and I was like, can I show you something? This is the occipital, this is the hardest part of your head. You're not going to hurt me. And so I took her hand and I was like, hit me, feel that? Hit me just like that. It's totally okay. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's got to be real. Otherwise, I'll have egg on my face and I can't act a response to it unless I feel it. And it's okay. This is my limit. I'm telling you what my limit is. You don't have a problem. And so we did 9 or 10 takes. And finally, she just gave me a good wallop. And it was so good. Right after the scene, I said, that's the moment you and I became mother and son. Because people don't hit strangers that way. They hit loved ones that way. And we're connected now. People believe it. People will believe that moment. And then, and you can look it up on the internet. At one point, she had hit me so many times on the show, they set it to Blue Danube. And sometimes she would hit me so hard, it would make her braces rattle and it would be bad for sound. So she'd have to hit me again. They'd have to tape her bracelets. And the whole point of it was, whatever she felt was okay, I'm like, add 10%. Add 10% to that hit, and it'll be great. It'll be, we're family. Otherwise, nobody'd let somebody hit them like that if they weren't, is the point. Other than that, like, the rest of it was just like enjoying her classic Hollywood broad stories, because she was the last Universal contract player that they had. She was an ingenue, gorgeous in her day and gorgeous to this very day. So her experience of going through all of this, like these different phases, and having her show canceled and being the first show brought back by fan letters, like, I know,
pivotal. Insane. We talked about that. It was like, and then you have to you put it in the context that like there wasn't the internet, it wasn't email. People wrote letters and licked stamps and mailed them. Right. Yeah. And that's absolutely what made him take it more seriously. Because you could actually, these days, somebody could pay a bot farm to send emails or start a hashtag thing and artificially inflate it to get a show back on the air. An executive producer could go, we'll spend $150,000 and we'll just create an AstroTurf campaign online. You can't do that with written paper letters. Right. I mean, for example, bringing back a Zack Snyder cut for Justice League, for example, hypothetically. I mean, oh dear God. They are never going to get it right. I think with Gunn, they will. I think Gunn is great. I really do. Yes, I agree. Here's the problem that they have is that Marvel stole Superman and turned him into Captain America. The Boy Scout aspect of Captain America, everybody was like, you can't do that. It doesn't work anymore. It's too innocent. It's too naive and morally, people, there's very little moral gray area with him. It won't work these days. It fucking worked. It absolutely worked. And I have on my startup screen on my iPad, I have the shot of Captain America standing alone against Thanos and the entire army. That's the moment when he doesn't know everybody else is coming to help. Right.
And he just cinches his arm and goes, all right, somebody's got to do this. And I might die, but I got to do whatever I can. And that's amazing. Like, that's a hero story. That's the kind of hero story of old. It's classic. It's undying. And it's exactly what Superman used to be. It's exactly what the Christopher Reeve Superman brought. You know, it wasn't the whole, like, you'll believe a man can fly. It was less about the physical nature of the flight that he did and more about this man is of an elevated form. He's that good. And they just threw it out the window. They made him a jealous dick. You know, they lean more towards the Watchmen zone of things and this nihilistic 90s horseshit. Same thing that made them have to split storylines on the X-Men ultimately, because there was too much nihilism in this like 90s take that Sony wanted to do. And you're like, we don't want these big colorful uniforms. That's passe. And then Spider-Man comes along and goes, actually, we learned a lesson. Marvel learned a lesson from the black suit during the late 80s and after Secret Wars, that you can't, that there is a value to it. There is a moral value to this brightness in the characters. And certain characters can't and shouldn't be, like Batman or the Punisher, for example. And I would argue that recently, anyways, they've done better work with the Batman in the DCU than they have done with the Punisher, because the Punisher is an apology and it's just kind of a mercenary military dude. It's kind of run of the mill. They might as well be doing the Dolph Lundgren version at this point instead of spandex, super muscular, giant decal, clips made out of the teeth, white boots and hands so that when you're shooting at him, you don't know what you're shooting at, which was the whole purpose of his uniform, that he could distract you in the dark. That's why his feet and his extremities are white, so you'll target them and be confused. Like, they just like, he's wearing a Punisher shirt from the comic book that he found his kid gave it to him from a store that he would find. Like that storyline of it is just embarrassing and lame. And the series where he's like in therapy is just pathetic. Like, nobody's ever done a Punisher movie. Nobody. There's never been a Punisher series. And there's never been a Punisher movie because every time they try, they do it with their tail tucked between their legs. And he's not that kind of character. You can argue that The Crow and Cobra to some degree and John Wick are Punisher movies.
Yeah.
They really, yeah.
Cobra? You mean Sylvester Stallone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because it's tongue in cheek, but he's also unabashedly muscular. He's very flashy. It's not about hiding in the dark. Like, the thing about the Batman is, and why they can do it and kind of get away with it, is because while he has all this shit on, he still can just kind of like hide in the darkness. And so it's never really like, even when the spotlight is on him, it's kind of a cutout. It's different than when you're in a big red outfit perched on the top of a building. You're way more out there than if you're in stealth gear looking like a ninja with ears. So they've kind of dodged that because of the nature of the character. Batman is perfectly set up for that kind of thing.
Yeah, my favorite trivia on Cobra is that was what Sylvester Stallone created that from Beverly Hills Cop.
Right. Well, he bought, and he had one more movie with Golem Globus to get out of his contract, and he needed to do it. And he wrote it kind of as a comedy. He wrote it, the idea was, I'm going to make a spoof of my own shit and finish it. And then it became super fucking serious and became, I think, one of the best examples of like horror action genre that exists, because the villain in it with his gaunt cheeks and his roided out muscles and his crazy mom character that he's obviously in a relationship with, and his giant curved blade with the spikes on it that's like a signature weapon, just like Mike Myers or any of these other guys. Like, that knife, you can picture it right now. Anybody who's seen the movie could draw it on a piece of paper. And that's classic horror genre, is that whatever the monsters, whether it's Freddy's claws or whatever, you've got to be able to say what their weapon is right out of the gate, if they have a signature one, or if they're not just, like in the case of, Friday the 13th, just using everything and you're like an interior decorator, just hanging bodies everywhere. So at the end, everyone can discover them like a crap Southern horror, like Halloween House of Horrors. Yeah. Every time you turn around, a body drops down. Like, did he really put it there? That's not where they died. That means he did that on purpose. You have to understand, like, how ridiculous the Jason Voorhees character ultimately is, because all the dead bodies he positioned later as a way of stopping people from being able to escape by being shocked and not being able to go past a dead body through a door is the idea.
Right.
And in the first one, it's the mom, not even Jason, which means this woman was lifting males that were bigger than her and hanging them up by their feet. Like, it's just not possible unless she's crazy, super powerful. But anyways, I'll go down a hole with that. But Cobra itself is this mix of like tongue-in-cheek, Dirty Harry stuff mixed with genuine, like, this cult horror concept of who the villain was. You know, these people who bang their axes together, and the idea is that they're going to bring down society. That's the whole purpose, is just fear. An anti-Miranda movie, just like the original Dirty Harry, because that's all the Dirty Harry movies initially were a reaction to Miranda, just like Cannonball Run and Smokey and the Bandit were reactions to the national 55 speed limit. That culturally, the whole culture reacts to things, and then there's a movie that says, yeah, fuck that everybody goes and sees.
Sorry to interrupt for a quick break, and we're back with Hal Sparks. You got an amazing take on all this stuff. So
well, I genuinely mean that, and you can even look at like zombie movies, how they've changed. Everybody's like, why are zombies running and fast and blah blah blah? Well, because zombies initially were about communism. These things would eat your brain, which is the seat of your individuality, and they were basically mindless workers. That whole society was being turned. Invasion of the Body Snatchers was very similar. You lose all your emotions and your individuality, and you just you go back and you keep doing your job, but there's no you left anymore, right? That was the fear at that time. There's the Red Scare and the growth of communism and the fear that that's what was going to take over. And that was, and so it metastasized into a cultural phenomenon that was creeping zombies, right? Just like the industrial age, the original universal monsters were all trapped in the industrial age because pollution was choking everyone to death. So even whether you were a monster, a werewolf, or a vampire, you were choking people by the neck because breathing was becoming a fear. Coal miners and industrial pollution were making people having breathing problems. So that became the scare point. Now it's rioting poor people with bloodborne diseases. That's where 28 Days Later came from. AIDS had reached a zenith of fear. The concept of what AIDS meets Ebola, all the hot zone books that had come out. What if it just spit it on you and you become one? They don't even, and then they eat you. Sometimes they don't, and then you become one, or what? Like, there's a myriad of ways. But the fact that they could run and they look like Antifa riots is part of that cultural fear point. So it shifted from the fear of communism and us all just being, having our brains melon scooped out to we're all going to get sick from this blood disease and rage and grossness and just set our own world on fire.
I could listen to you talk all day.
Yeah, you could, but I have a show where I talk all day.
No, so that was my clever segue.
I appreciate it.
That was my Scott moment for you.
That's right. Yeah. Imagine like he could always tie that shit together.
Tell everyone about your mega hours, mega worldwide, mega an hour live streams that you do every day.
At the beginning of lockdown, the world was shutting down. Everybody's like, it'll be 6 weeks. And I had been in China and I knew it was going to be months and months and months. I was like, well, how can I contribute to people's sanity and fortitude throughout this time? And as a comedian and as somebody who knows a thing or two about politics, I felt like the best way was just to hop online and skewer things as they happen and kind of operate as that comedy pressure valve. Let the steam out a little so people don't lose it. Especially early part of COVID, that seal was on there strong. Like people were like, oh my God, this is when people are stocking up on toilet paper and afraid to go outside. That's pretty gnarly.
Right.
I started doing it as that. And I was like, and I don't know when, even if this opens up, I don't know when live stuff will happen again. And that, between shows, between series or movies or whatever, stand up is my main gig. It's how I pay my mortgage and get health care for my kid and all that stuff. And it's necessary. And all of my gigs just were like knocked off the table, just obliterated, like a lot of other people, like musicians and comedians all over the place. And I was like, I got to do something. I can complain about it, but the whole world's in this mess. And so I dove in for about a month, just like watching how to make it big on YouTube, how to be a big Twitch streamer, all that kind of stuff. And I just went to school while I did this every day at alternate times, just following what was in the news. I went in there and I was like, okay, you got to lock a schedule. You got to build a kind of consistency. People can know what to expect and when to expect it. And then I just started building the show. So I started doing it regularly 5 days a week, my radio show on Saturdays. That eventually sprouted last year, a morning show, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, because I work out Tuesday and Thursday mornings with a trainer. So I didn't do morning shows on that day. And it also gives me the break that I need to do it. And then I've just basically just shown up and done the work every day. That seems to be the other thing. It's just like, get it, like, and part of the whole purpose of the show is to make fun of what, you know, these people who I have political differences with, the absurdity of their argument in totality. So if they post a clip that's 7 minutes long, I cover the whole 7-minute clip. I don't go in there like a lot of YouTube streamers or a lot of YouTube reaction videos and just take little bits. Somebody says something stupid, you excise that piece out of their argument, make your whole video about that, and unfairly either take out of context or act as if you don't make mistakes yourself, which everyone does, by taking their mistake and messing with it. And by using their videos in the full length that they do it, they have said, this is my argument. This is my on this particular topic with this particular title. This is everything. They decided that. So I feel free to, from top to tails, skewer that whole thing. I did all of Trump's rallies all the way through. I've only missed 2 because they were so repetitive. Like at a certain point, my own, like I was getting bored with them. But I cover, you know, the whole things. And the reason I cover those whole things was because everybody was saying nobody's covering him. Nobody's doing the whole thing. They're just picking these little pieces out. I'm like, all right, I'll be the guy. I'll do the whole thing. Then you can't say nobody. You can only say, well, Hal Sparks did it. And so I did all the Mike Pillow movies, all of his like absolute proof and absolute evidence and all that stuff about the elections. I've done all of those. I did the My Son Hunter movie. I did the Dinesh D'Souza 2000 Mules movie. Did them all the way through, line for line. Some of them took me 6 hours. But I got through the whole thing and broke them down and said, there, somebody's watched the whole thing and answered everything that's in it. And I feel like there's a value in that. So I feel like I'm providing a worthwhile service and a little bit of like historical, like putting my pin in what was going on in the digital online political performance art world, that everybody, as a footnote, as an asterisk on this time at some point, like nobody even saw those things except Hal Sparks. And I feel like that's a gift I can give. And I feel like I've always felt comedy is a service industry. It's like being a massage therapist or a waiter more than it is like being a king or a movie star. You're there to relieve tension. And there's so much tension about these things that I feel like if I can walk in there and go, okay, this is where these talking points came from. This is why you keep hearing this. You heard this on Fox News and you might have heard it on Newsmax, but here's where it started on this guy's podcast. Here's the piece. This is where they're getting this bullshit from. And we'll go straight to the source and break it down. I'll go through the whole thing. And that's going for the root, not the fruit of the problem.
Right.
So every day, 5 days a week at 3 o'clock Pacific time. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific time. I do a morning show where it's more philosophical. We look at what's trending, and I just kind of allow that to be the start of the conversation. And then Saturdays, my radio show, the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, which has been going on for 13 years now. I live stream that as well on YouTube at infotainmentwars.com or at Twitch at twitch.tv/Hal Sparks, or on my Facebook page or on Twitter where it, kind of streams as well. That's my schedule currently. And then in between those shows, when I'm not gracing you, Jeff, with my presence, in those moments, I'm usually watching the news or reading something to catch up on, okay, I'm hearing this rumble of a storyline that's coming out. Let me educate myself so that I'm not caught unawares by a storyline. Still happens because there's so much stuff going on. But that's the middle of my day, is like reference and study in between the streams.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a job. It's a full-time endeavor.
Absolutely. I mean, I see it. There isn't a time I'm scrolling where I don't I don't see you live streaming at some point during the day. Yeah, ain't nothing to it but to do it. I'm this way, though. I'm a bit obsessive when I get into something. If I'm passionate about something, I want it to be unique and I want it to be my version of it. And if it can't be, I will lose interest very easily. And I feel like every human being has their own personal worth. And so why wouldn't I show mine in everything, as an example of that? That's great.
So I just jump on and here's my take. You don't have to like it, but it's genuine.
It's awesome. Well, thank you for genuinely spending time with me today.
My pleasure. Glad to do it. And at some point, after we enter into a more open phase at some point, I'll have you come on the morning show, like after the holidays or something, when we're not arcing up towards the swearing in of the new Congress or those kind of moments that we have that eat up everything. And you'll have to come on the morning show and just go through some entertainment trends stuff with me. And we can both kind of dunk on the Zack Snyder DCU. And then
I would love that. I would love that.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I have one question before I go.
Yeah.
Is that one of the Brady Bunch people over your left shoulder? Or is that Tom Jones?
That is not one of the Brady Bunch people. That is three. That is Greg Brady.
Right.
And then that is Peter and Cindy.
Okay, yeah, the black and white one I couldn't really make out. You can't, but I knew that was, I'm like, I could tell that's Greg Brady just from the hair and eyebrows.
Yeah.
Because it's blurry and all that stuff. And I was like, and then that's Cindy Williams in the middle.
Cindy Williams, and then Henry Winkler, and then that's Scott Schwartz right there, Flick. And then we were talking about Saban earlier. That's David Yost, the Blue Power Ranger.
Oh, yeah.
Lando Calrissian.
Nice. Yeah. Can we just agree on our way out the door that Henry Winkler is like the sweetest person that has ever lived?
Other than him turning me down 4 times for this podcast, yes, he is the great. I've met him twice. He is the greatest human being in the world. Hands down. He
is such lovely man. And he used to produce the Hollywood Squares when I did it. How you like that?
Oh, wow.
And that's where I first met him. And he was just a frigging gem. And I swear to God, Night Shift is one of the funniest movies in history. And him just like wiping the sweat of his brow with a piece of bread when he's looking at Shelley Long, like in her underwear, trying to get something off the top shelf of his. Oh God, it's just
Night Shift and Michael Keaton. I mean, that's like,
oh my God, Michael Keaton is amazing in that. Like, he's just so good. The two or three times I've run into Michael Keaton, because I love his work in general. I love Beetlejuice and all that kind of stuff, but nothing like Billy Blaze as a character. Just, I must have like the crazy, this guy's a Night Shift fan look on my face when I met Michael Keaton. Yeah, one of the times was at the Playboy Mansion. I have to say, that night, meeting Michael Keaton was the second best thing that happened to me that night. That's all I'm saying.
All right, we'll leave it at that.
Yes, we will. Cheers.
Cheers, my friend. Thank you. All right, everyone. How amazing was Hal Sparks? So fun to talk to. You never know where the conversation's going to go, but I loved every second of it. Such great stories, such great insights, such great points of view. Loved having Hal back on the show. With the interview over, I guess it means we're at the end of the episode. I can't believe it. Episode 262 has come to an end. I want to thank once again my guest, Hal Sparks. Thank you, sir. And of course, I want to thank all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.